to start. I'm Ed Bogish. I'm the Executive Director of SyracuseCoE. We're New York State's Center of Excellence in Environmental and Energy Systems. As we start, I acknowledge with respect the Onondaga Nation, fire keepers of the Haudenosaunee, the indigenous people on whose ancestral lands Syracuse University now stands. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone here in the room and on the web to the May monthly Research and Technology Forum of SyracuseCoE. This is a program that we offer thanks to our industry partners. If your firm or institution is not currently a partner of SyracuseCoE, I invite you to contact me and or Kerry Marshall here in the back, or Chetna Chinese here in the front, and we'd be happy to tell you about the partner program and the benefits of partnerhood. I'm very, very pleased to have this R&T forum presented by one of our startup partners, Acumen Detection. And one of the reasons that I'm excited about it is it exemplifies our relationship with the Central New York Biotechnology Accelerator. A year ago, with support from National Grid, we collaborated with the Central New York Biotechnology Accelerator to jointly brand this corner of the city of Syracuse as Central New York's Innovation Crossroads. And I'm a really literal guy. So actually, if you look at this photo, you see the COE building and the Central New York Biotechnology Accelerator. So actually, the Innovation Crossroads is that intersection right there between East Washington Street and Foreman Avenue. What's that? Yeah, no, it's this intersection, right? Not that intersection. This is the intersection we're talking about. And in our graphics on this, there's a little plus sign for all of these combinations between environment, energy, health, and biotechnology. But also that plus sign is like right there, the intersection. So we put up banners along utility poles along these two streets to draw attention to the collaboration between these two facilities. Again, we thank National Grid for encouraging this collaboration. National Grid was critical in the development of collaborations in a neighborhood in Buffalo called the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus, a 120-acre campus of firms and institutions that are collaborating and driving the Buffalo economy. So we aspire to have this area develop as a similar hotbed of innovation and collaboration with startup companies. And so Acumen Detection, you'll hear, is here at SyracuseCoE in offices and a lab, and they also have an R&D lab at the Central New York Biotechnology Accelerator. And we're very, very, very excited to have this collaboration between our two centers. I'm also pleased to introduce this team led by Chuck Storman. I have known Chuck Storman for more than 30 years. I think it's 32 or 33 years. I came to Syracuse University as an assistant professor in mechanical and aerospace engineering in 1985. And one of the reasons I came to Syracuse University was a new center called the CASE Center, Computer Applications and Software Engineering. And the CASE Center encouraged faculty members to work with industry, and I came to Syracuse because of the promise of through the CASE Center, establishing collaborative relationships with Carrier Corporation. CASE Center had an annual summer meeting at a camp in the Adirondacks owned by Syracuse University, the Minnowbrook Lodge. And it was at the Minnowbrook meeting, I imagine, in 1986 or 1987, I met a PhD student named Chuck Storman. Chuck graduated from Syracuse University in computer engineering in 1983, and he got a master's degree in 1986, and he was working on a PhD. And I think it was as a PhD student, he stood up and he talked about an idea for a product called content addressable memory. And I remember this presentation by this PhD student being one of the best presentations I had ever seen, and it stands as one of the best presentations I've ever seen. Content addressable memory. Chuck stood up and said, it's like if you were needed to find a needle in a haystack, and he showed an image on an overhead projector with a cellophane, slide of a haystack on a farm. And he said, if you had to find a needle in a haystack, imagine if you could call out to the haystack, hey needle. And then he showed another slide, and the needle was poking its head up out of the haystack and waving and saying, oh, I'm over here. And that was content addressable memory. So now Chuck is back on the farm with haystacks. Who knew that this PhD student in computer engineering would, he left being a PhD student. He started a company called Coherent Research, which was different from his first idea, which was incoherent research. And then he had a startup company called Coherent Networks. And then he had other startups. So this is startup number 7, count them. You hear the word serial entrepreneur. So I'm pleased to introduce, this is what it looks like, the serial entrepreneur, Chuck Storman, graduate of the College of Engineering and Computer Science and CEO of Acumen Detection, Inc., Chuck Storman.
Thank you, Ed. That was very kind and very accurate. Reminiscence, your rendition was just about perfect. I, however, was 32 years younger then, so I apologize for having grown old. But I'm very glad that everybody got an opportunity to come here today and hear about this exciting company. I joined this company only a year ago. I didn't start the business. It was actually founded as a subsidiary of SRC, a great local company, and also originally a spin out of Syracuse University. So this is really coming full circle. And Lieutenant Colonel Tim Moser, retired, U.S. Army retired, is not with us today, but he founded this business and literally beat swords into plowshares to create this company from work that he did throughout his career in the pursuance of the national defense. So we're not going to talk about defense today. It's all going to be about dairy. And I'd just like to start with an image that I think will whet your appetite for our talk. Dairy is one of the high quality sources of protein and nutrition that feeds billions of people year round. I'm sure that this is an image that will get some of you interested in hearing what else we have to say. As a high quality source of protein, it's also a source of great cultural enjoyment and fun. This is another image that, for anybody who wasn't interested in that image, I hope I catch you with this image. Now, you may or may not know that dairy is also big business. In the US alone, the dairy industry accounts for $50 billion a year in revenues. That makes it the #1 commodity in the United States. It also happens to be the #1 commodity in New York State. We live in a dairy state. Some of you know that, some of you don't. Now I'm going to just quiz the audience. I hope you're all prepared. Is New York State the #1 dairy state in the country? Yes or no?
No.
Okay, what is the #1 dairy state in the country?
Wisconsin.
Wrong, it's California. But you got the first question right. California is #1, New York State is #2, and Wisconsin is #3. So it's a really interesting thing. Of course, depending on the metric you choose for rank ordering. So within this $50 billion US market, I'm going to identify the problem that our company solves. And it happens to be the problem of maintaining quality and safety throughout the dairy supply chain, particularly at the source. So this is a cartoon description of the dairy supply chain. It starts with cows eating grass, sometimes eating grain, the milk being collected from the cows, refrigerated and processed and trucked to a processing plant, processed at a central processing plant, shipped, packaged and to market, and then finally being retailed and sold to a customer. At every single stage in this process, the dairy supply chain is very focused on quality and safety. So let's go back to the very beginning of where that quality comes from, the cow on the farm. Farms, dairy farms in particular, but not exclusively, farms have become very sophisticated operations with very detailed information environments consisting of sensors and computers and big data and modeling and databases against the problem of optimizing every part of that farming operation. Grass production, milk production, feed management, managing costs, environmental management, and yes, disease management. Our product solves a problem in disease management. How big a problem? This figure of $2 billion a year is the estimated cost each and every year in the US alone of one disease called mastitis. Mastitis is an inflammation of the udder. That's a depiction of the udder with all these contagious and environmental organisms looking for an opportunity to infect the cow. That infection sometimes happens by a bacteria or another organism entering the teat opening where the milk comes out. White blood cells come to the rescue and they flood the area to let the cow's immune system deal with the invading pathogen. And those white blood cells then cause inflammation. Now, when the inflammation is visible, when there's a sign of inflammation, you call that clinical mastitis. It's diagnosed by a veterinarian, and it's a disease that can be treated or left for the cow's immune system to take care of it. But before there are any symptoms or signs, that cow might have an infection that would be subclinical, meaning there is no way of humanly detecting that there is a problem there. And yet, the symptoms of that infection that are noticeable is if you measure the quality of the milk, you'll find too many white blood cells in that milk. Too many white blood cells in the milk is a problem for every next step in the supply chain. If you're making drinking milk, or if you're making cheese, or if you're making yogurt, the presence of those pathogens and the white blood cells that the immune system responds to them with have an effect on the quality, the taste, the nutrition, the ability to grow yogurt cultures or cheese cultures. Everything changes because the nature of the milk changes during that subclinical infection. Now, I say this is a $2 billion problem because that's what Cornell estimates the cost of clinical mastitis to be, that affects 25% of the herd, 25% of the dairy cows, the 9.4 million dairy cows in a given year. But what about the subclinical mastitis? The estimate is that's another 25%. Does it cost another $2 billion? Not easy to measure because subclinical is a problem that isn't currently being addressed aggressively in the dairy industry until now. So what we bring to the party is a set of technologies that have been developed and designed to make early detection of infections, particularly with contagious pathogens that might spread disease across the farm. We're going to give you a demo of the system, so I'm not going to belabor it here, but there are two key innovations. This is the brilliance that the founding team brought to this, and some of them you'll hear from today, that brought to this product. The milk prep kit is a key innovation that eliminates an hour and a half of what normally is required in a laboratory to do DNA purification and replaces it with a few minutes. You can literally prepare 24 samples in half an hour, so a few minutes instead of an hour and a half of painstaking laboratory work. The assay itself that tests for the presence of pathogens is also an innovation because it can work on the farm. It can work in a non-controlled environment with samples that, you don't know exactly what's going on with samples. And then the system that uses a well-known technique called polymerase chain reaction to detect the DNA of the invading pathogens. Why should you care? Because if a farmer knows that there's a contagion on his farm, and if she can isolate that contagion to an individual cow, he or she can either cull that cow or treat that cow, depending on the organism. If it's treatable, treat it. If it's not treatable, at least get the infectious carrier off of the farm. And the results we've seen from this in the farms and vet clinics and milk laboratories that we do business with is dramatic. A decrease in the level of disease and an increase in the quality of milk. So now I'd like to tell you a little bit more about it. And to do that, I'm going to introduce Dr. Faraz Rinzan, who is our, I missed my slide. That's the picture that goes with that better quality. Dr. Faraz Rinzan is our Director of Microbiology. She heads up the R&D developing new products to increase our relevance to this market. And she's going to tell you a little bit about our R&D process and her laboratory across the street in the biotechnology center. You can skip that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll talk a little bit about the what we do in the R&D lab. So as Chuck mentioned, there's my lab across the street. So I think I'm the prime example of innovation crossroads. I keep crossing this road many times a day, back and forth, and doing this. So that's the lab, and we have another room for cultures where the biosafety hood is there. That picture is not here. So in our lab, we do, in our product, we have three main components. One is the sample prep kit, as Chuck mentioned. The other one is the PCR assay, and then the algorithm. So everything from designing, developing, validating, testing, everything is done in the R&D lab. And so to go a little bit into the sample prep kit, so Chuck mentioned we have a milk prep kit. We also have expanded it to make process colostrum. Colostrum is a little bit different from milk. So we do that, and also we are in the process of developing another kit for nasal swabs. So again, the main differentiator of our product is the milk prep kit. What it really does is, as Chuck said, it will purify the DNA quicker. And also milk has inhibitors that can inhibit PCR. So if you just take a milk sample and try to test it, or just extract the DNA and test it, it will be hard because it inhibits PCR and it will shut down. But we have in our tubes, we have a recipe that will take away the inhibitors and will make it very easy for you to test the sample. So that's our main differentiator. And the next part of that is the algorithm, which is a very critical step, because we have taken out the subjectivity of PCR, because at the end of the PCR test, what you will see is a curve, and you have to interpret the curve saying whether it's positive or negative. But what we have done is taken that subjectivity out of that and put thresholds. And so Ben will show you how it looks. At the end of the test, you will only see a positive or negative or presence or absence. So you don't have to do that guesswork. So those are the main things we do in our R&D lab. So this here, I'm just showing you to have a comparison with PCR and our method. These are the frequently used testing methods in the industry. This here is California mastitis test. What this test will do is just tell you whether the milk is good or bad. So as Chuck showed you, once there's an infection, there's a lot of leukocytes or white blood cells in the region to combat the infection. But what happens is in this test, you only detect for if there are a lot of white blood cells or not. So it won't really tell you if there's a pathogen and what type of pathogen is there. It will just tell you what kind of problem you have. And also there's again, somebody has to interpret this. When I first did this, somebody at Cornell showed me after laboratories, Cornell showed me how to do this. When I first did it, it was really hard to interpret. It was different from how I interpret it and somebody who is very much trained in it. So you have to look at the clotting of the nerve, and that's how you say the good or bad. So that's the downside of this California mastitis. And then up here you have aerobic culture on bladder, and this is called the gold standard in industry. So what you do here is you take a sample of milk, shake it on the base, incubate it for 4 hours, and bring the plate. So problem comes on who reads the plate. Say a person who's newly trained versus a person who has done this for 30 years. The way they interpret this plate will be drastically different. Especially they have been trained to say that if you see more than 3 types of colonies, call it a contamination. So what they do is they call it a contamination and they resample. They ask for the farm to send another sample, and then they go through the entire process once again, which takes 24 to 48 hours for incubation, and then I don't know how long to get the sample back from the farm. So during that whole time, what will happen is that you keep spreading the infection if there's a contagious pathogen in your farm. So here I selected this plate just to show you. These 3 colonies here, and then here, what you have is Staph aureus, which is very contagious. So if it's a very trained person, they will interpret as saying, okay, there is Staph. So they will take that precaution. Whereas if a newly trained person will say, okay, this is contamination. So again, there's that subjectivity that goes into this kind of thing. This here is Minnesota research system. It's a little bit upgrade from this. So in that system, you can see there are 3 different parts. So what happens is you can differentiate between gram negatives and gram positives, and also between Staph and Staph. But that's how much you can do with that. You cannot go beyond that and know whether it's Staph aureus or different Staph. So that's how much you can do. So it's a little upgrade, better than this, but that's about it. So what I'm trying to show you here is both these methods have its pros and cons. Especially the good thing about this is it's very cheap. The culture media are really cheap compared to PCR tests. But then, what about this non-cultural organism? There are around 30% of bacteria or microorganisms in the environment that are not cultured. So no matter how much you try to grow in this space, it won't do. So then you won't detect it. So that's when our PCR comes handy and anything can be detected as long as the DNA is there, test that and leave it back. So then comes mycoplasma. Mycoplasma is called a silent killer in farms. Why it is called like that is mycoplasma has a lot of different characters. Although it's a bacteria, it is very small and it doesn't have a cell wall. So a lot of its characteristics or how it acts come from that specific nature of it. So say that in routine culturing or routine testing in our farms, what they do is aerobic culture. They just put the sample on bladder plate and grow it. But they're not ever going to detect mycoplasma. The reason is mycoplasma is it needs a lot of other nutrients, special nutrients, plus carbon dioxide. So no matter how much we keep looking at this stage, we're not doing honey. And once mycoplasma infects, there's no remedy or no treatment because they don't answer antibiotic therapy. The reason is they don't have cell wall. So most antibiotics attack the cell wall. So say that you culture the mycoplasma, say you use all the necessary special media and also carbon dioxide and you culture it. Still, you need 3 to 7 days to see a visible growth on it. So what have you done now? You waited so long, 7 days pass, and it's a very contagious bacteria. We have given time to spread throughout the body. So that's why our PCR again constantly uses. Then Cordyceps is an algae. It's also not a bacteria. So we have a test for that too. Cordyceps, how it can become a problem is Cordyceps can grow on this plate as a white colony, and again you will miss it easily. And Cordyceps can also confuse these plates because although they say it's a selective medium for special organisms, Cordyceps can do it. So I'm just showing you how different or how better our system is compared to what you have. So this is just a side-by-side comparison of what we have and the culture, not necessarily aerobic culture, any culture method. I'm not going to go over everything. This is what I talked just now. So specifically look at turnaround time, 24 to 48 hours for culture and for mycoplasma for 7 days, but we have less than 3 hours. And most important is these four. Why I say that is, if you see shelf stability, culture plates won't stay that long, and our assay can stay for a very long time, for years without it doing that, so you can use it. And then as I explained to you, sample prep kit, why I have highlighted this is, so sample prep is not needed for culture, it's very easy. You have to do a sample prep for a system or PCR, but think about it when you compare with the lab PCR. The general PCR, as Chuck told you before, how much work you have to do to get the DNA out. So comparing to that, we have a huge advantage of time and chemicals and personnel and all that. And again, for culture, you need a skilled microbiologist, and for the PCR method, you need somebody who knows what they're doing with all those meticulous hyperchemicals. And for our thing, our system can be easily trained, everybody can get that training within and then again, as I showed you, subjectivity is here in pathogens that block everything, whereas we have to come out. So that's how, that's all these things are done here in the lab. That's what I did. So I now introduce.
Before you pass it, I think you have an appeal you'd like to tell the audience that you're interested in hiring a certain kind of individual.
Yes. So as I showed you, there's a lot of work to be done. We have more assays coming, more practice, more validations, a lot of new things going on. So if you know anybody who wants to do internships, we'll be happy to have you. And now I'll introduce Angelina Lumia, our Director of Production.
So I'm Angelina. I'm responsible for manufacturing our consumables. Right now, our consumables are assays and our Moser kit. We have several different kinds of assays, but our best-selling assay right now is micro, and that tests for mycoplasma and Cordyceps. In these diagrams I have behind me, I've tried to simplify the process of manufacturing these consumables. So, bottom left here, this is the process for manufacturing the assay. Basically, a certain amount of proprietary reagents go into a master mix, and I test that mix for quality control using the same instrument that we sell to our customers. Once I determine that that is good to go, I put it in the freezer, it freezes, and we send it to our freeze drying company. Our freeze drying company freeze dries our assays into little 0.2 ml tubes that you can see right there. And they also package them in those foil pouches. The foil pouches are very easy to open because we have little notches So no scissors required or anything like that. Once the assays come back, I test them again because, you know, I'm handing it off to someone else and I want to make sure that how it left is how it came back. And if I determine that it's good to go, we can sell it to our distributors or to our direct customers with sick cows on their farm. As far as the milk prep kit, similar process, a certain amount of proprietary agents go into containers. I quality control that by testing the pH, and it has to be between a certain range. If I determine that that is okay, it doesn't leave the building. I fill those tubes and pack them and label them on my own. Once they're filled and capped and labeled, we're ready to send them out to our distributors or the farms, which would be our direct customers. Also, not all of our assays are freeze-dried. Some of our customers do buy frozen assays. We have that as an option when it's necessary. We're also working on what we call an automation project. Chuck and I meet on this every week, and we are searching for something that can kind of create a production line. So filling, capping, labeling of the milk prep kit. We determined a budget, and we initially started looking for an all-in-one instrument that could do all of these things. They're proving to be very expensive.
Only 7 times our budget.
But, you know, for long, I hope that our budget will just increase. But right now, we're doing what we can. So instead of an all-in-one instrument, we're moving towards looking to individual components. Something that can fill, something else that can cap, and something else that can label. One of the most promising things we found was this robot by Opentron called OT2. It's very easy to use, and you can put it right on the benchtop. The software, I mean, we don't have the robot yet, but I looked at the software already, and it seems very user-friendly. And it can fill soup a lot faster than these things. So, and it's right around our budget. So we are currently working on that, and we're also searching for any interns that could help us with this project and maybe with the facility capping and labeling. If anyone wants to see my lab, it's downstairs in room 62, and we can go down after this if you like, or let me know, I'll be available. And that's all I have.
What's the name of your laboratory?
Well, funny story about that. My laboratory is named after a previous EFS professor that I had when I went to EFS. He was the liaison for this lab when it was being built. And I emailed him and asked him, you know, we'd like to honor you with naming my lab after you. And he said, that's awesome. And, you know, he said it was good to hear from me. And so now there's a plaque on the door next to it, and it's named after Dr. Arthur Stepanek. So now I'm going to hand it off to my good friend and our director of technology, Anyway.
Oh, really?
Hawaii. A little bit.
So as director of technology, I'm responsible for the hardware and software development for the company. So I quickly wanted to go over each one. I'll speak to mostly to the slides just so people online aren't left out. But for people who are interested, feel free to stop by and check the actual listen in person. Ask me a question. So we have a very modular solution. You see the components in the slide on the left. It consists of P blocks, a centrifuge in the middle, and then our thermal circulator, which is the one. And those 3 components together, along with the laptop, are all the hardware that's required for our system. So the benefit to this modular solution is that it's upgradable. So over time, as technology advances, you know, the farmers won't be left behind. We'll be able to provide upgrades to the newer technology for them. Also, it's serviceable. Obviously, the farm is a very harsh environment.
on technology, so if something gets broken, you can easily swap out. Oftentimes they can handle it completely on their own, just being learned with hardware. And it also is cost effective, which allows for the widest pool of customers, essentially. So smaller farms can also benefit from our system. And on the right, you see the milk cartons and kits, we are as well. As far as our software is concerned, I pulled a few screen captures from our software. So it starts out, we take a sample from the cows and one of these sample cups. You scan it into the system. You say which quadrant of the cow it came from, or if it's come out of the sample. And then you scan your tube A, which was the yellow caps that I previously referenced. From this point on, the system tracks the samples. So there's a chain of custody built in so that you don't have to keep track of which custom, which tube throughout the remainder of the process. So you transfer using the pipe header, shown in the image. So that's the other benefit of our system. It's designed for people without a scientific background. There's a lot of complicated science that goes into it, but you don't need to be a scientist to use it. So then you transfer it into your tube A, as shown on the first slide. Then you heat it for 20 minutes, spin for 10 seconds, and then on the second slide it shows where you scan your tube A, scan your tube B, and then transfer a show. After that, the treatment step is done, the preparation step, and you're able to perform your actual test, as shown in the third slide. For this, you pick one of our proprietary assays that we have, depending on what in particular is the top on your farm. We talked about microsized portfolio, which again is our biggest seller. So then again, scan again from 2B to the assay. It'll track up to 8 samples, and then you put samples 1 through 8, if you have 8 samples you want to test, into the thermal cycler. So all of our chemistry for the assays contains very small tube. And then approximately 2.5 hours later, as opposed to 1 to 7 days, depending on heat testing or culture. So again, 2.5 hours later, you get your results in plain English, so you can see in the bar right here in the last line, it'll say protein microbiome absent or starch absent, depending on what you're testing. So it's a lot easier than trying to read a plate or a curve on a computer. Our algorithm, which is also proprietary, does all the analysis for you, and it's based off of the best science available, developed in collaboration with Cornell. So to reintroduce
Thanks. Great job, team. So can I ask for a round of applause for the team? And does anybody have a question? It doesn't always have to be for me. You're all available. Any questions at all, or Carrie, any questions from the webinar?
Yeah.
Can you have your assay done for like a water sample? Because here there is a biological reaction between the cow and all the associated white bloods of cows.
So Dr. Lindsay, if you come up to the mic and answer the question.
The question is, does our system work with a water sample?
Our assays, the PCR assays, will definitely work with the water samples, if that was your question. But to tell you that we haven't validated it with the water samples. So without validating things, I'm not 100% comfortable saying, yeah, it will. But since it's a PCR assay, and if you find the DNA in the water sample, you're definitely going to detect it. But then it has to go through all those steps and get it validated for the whatever prep kit, or whether you want or don't want a prep kit, plus the algorithm. Because the algorithm is specifically, the thresholds are set for mastitic milk. So when we were doing all this development, what we saw is milk is different from mastitic milk. So if you take the store-bought bottle milk and do the same test with the same prep kit, it won't work. We have a different solution for that too. So depending on what you sample, we definitely need to validate that. But to answer your question, the assay will work. Generally, if you put the sample in the assay and test, you will see a curve.
Yeah, because the ESF professor was the one who was doing the PCR analysis of the Kinnear's water sample. And it took them 7 days to 10 days.
Yeah.
By the time they came out with safe. And until that time, nobody knew whether it was positive or negative. So if your test can even tell very quickly if it's positive or negative, at least they would know whether they have a sweet.
So we are also.
So from a science point of view, she's completely correct. From a business point of view, we're a very small company. We are trying to raise financing right now to become a larger company, to be well financed. But as a very small and very poorly funded company, we need to focus. That's why we're not going after water sampling or other kinds of food safety within the dairy supply chain. Right now, we're just doing this, and that will change. This technology and the patents that back it up are very broad, very applicable to food safety, national defense, and you name it. Lots and lots of opportunities for market expansion. But we need to develop as a business and have more investment, frankly, to be able to explore any of those other applications. Great question, though, and I'll just do a little follow-on. If you or your company or any professors or academics that you know would like to collaborate on these things, we don't need to be particularly well-funded as a company to explore R&D collaborations. And we're very interested in that, particularly if we can find some external funding. We're not a valid funding source at this point in our development, but we can certainly attract, with this technology and the right collaborators, grant money that we could work on some of these future potential markets and some other kinds of scientific collaboration. And by the way, the interns, I'll just make another plea for interns. Part of our commitment to the COE and to the Biotech Accelerator is that we'll engage with the university community. So collaborations with professors and academic researchers, as well as student engagement. So we have 2 laboratories that are up and running and very, very active, interesting projects. On the R&D side, we're developing things that will become products one day. We're validating ideas that we have about bringing out new products and new applications. On Angelina's side, we have a fully equipped and active production laboratory that's in the business of manufacturing laboratory grade consumables. And so depending on what the student's interest is, if they're more interested in science and research, then we have positions in Faraz's laboratory. If they're more interested in learning manufacturing and production, Angelina is a production chemist. And we're open for all of those kinds of things, as well as academic partnerships.
So the customers that actually perform the test, are they farmers? And if they are, what kind of environment are they working in? They've done clinical trials with false negative, false positive rates, things like that.
So the first question is, who's using this product? Is it farmers? And I have a little slide, I think. Yes, farmers, veterinarians, and milk laboratories are 100% of our customers today. We have customers in 18 states plus the province of Quebec. And by our estimate, as of today, these tests are being used across a collection of herds that add up to 74,000 cows. That's a tiny market penetration. In the US alone, there are 9.4 million dairy cows. So this is a very small percentage. Now, in terms of the specific individual who's running our system, most commonly on a dairy farm, it will be a person with the title of herdsman. Now, herdsmen are generally responsible for the health and well-being of the dairy herd. So they'll be checking cows, taking milk samples, looking at the bedding, the feed, the condition of the equipment. They're basically responsible for the day-to-day operation of the dairy. They are not the decision makers on the purchase, however. The decision maker would be the dairy manager or the dairy general manager, which sometimes is the person that owns the farm on a smaller farm. If you think of the size of these businesses, farmers are entrepreneurs that run very complicated businesses. A 1,000 cow dairy is a $5 million a year enterprise in terms of revenue. A 5,000 cow dairy is a $25 million enterprise. And there are dairies up to 100,000 cows in the world that are extremely large and complicated businesses, all the way down to the 100 cow dairy that might be a $500,000 a year business. That might just be a family farm, or a 50 cow dairy might be a family farm. So it's a very broad range. We've designed this system to hit the sweet spot. So anybody from 80 cows, which is our smallest customer, up to about 5,000 cows can use one of these systems. And if they have more than 5,000 cows, then they would just buy a second, a third, a fourth to handle the size that they were looking for. You asked a second question about clinical trials.
It's just the accuracy, false negatives or false positives, if it's in an uncontrolled environment, you know, how's that work?
Right, so this system has been designed to work in uncontrolled environments. Clinical trials are really for human things. This is a product that's aimed specifically at a market where you don't have to go through the rigor of a clinical trial. And in fact, it's called Acumen Detection specifically because that's an unregulated part of the veterinary industry. So we're allowed to sell this without going through the rigor of a human clinical trial. However, we have done extensive studies assisted by Cornell and Cornell's quality milk production services to make sure that we understand exactly how this system is working, both with prepared samples and with real thousands of real milk samples that were collected from farms all over the world. It's also been validated as far away as New Zealand by Dairy New Zealand. And it's been found to agree with culture almost 90% of the time when culture gives an answer. The power of this system is that it also gives an answer when culture fails, no growth or contaminated sample, and it works in 3 hours instead of some number of days. So we've done a very credible job of validating it scientifically, but not as far as a true clinical trial. Any other questions?
What's the sampling protocol in terms of, you know, you're not going to test every milk sample from every milking. So are there strategic points in time during the lactation that you're targeting? And
yeah, that's a great question. There are 4 times where sampling may be indicated, and I'll just say those are at freshening, at dry off, when a clinical infection is noticed, and at takeout, meaning when the clinical infection has apparently been solved visually, but you want to find out if it's been solved bacteriologically. So those are the 4 times that testing is indicated. There is a pattern, however, of the most frequent use is at freshening and freshen clinical cows. Now, for those of you who aren't dairymen, freshening is when a cow has given birth and then has given colostrum for a while, and then is started giving milk again and is ready to go back into the productive population called the milking string to be in close proximity with all the other productive cows. So what our farmers have decided is just before we add that fresh cow back into the production, let's find out if she's contagious. And if she's not contagious, she goes right back into production. If she is contagious, she goes to a hospital pen where she can get special treatment. That practice alone of testing every cow throughout the year when she freshens we've had, and this is anecdotal, but we've had we have a testimonial from one of our farmers that says it's cut his somatic cell count, which is the key measure of milk quality, in half. That means he can qualify for premiums. He can be paid higher prices for his milk because he's doubled the quality of the milk by cutting the number of white blood cells that get into the milk in half. That's the kind of dramatic impact that protocol has had for him.
What's the cost per test?
Retail $12. And that includes everything you need. If you have the system, then $12 per test. Now, most of our farmers get it for less because we sell through distributors, and many of our distributors are using very thin margins. We have one distributor that likens themselves to Walmart. They practically sell it for the wholesale price. So, you know, let's say an average of $8 to $10 is the kind of market rate. And by the way, a single case of mastitis will cost you $444 in terms of all the expense related to it. So it's a small price to pay to be sure you're not spreading infection. Well, you know, I want to give one last round of questions.
Just a business question. Why
Yes.
only in 18 states? This looks like no-brainer. Literally, you have to have a marketing wing and instantaneously you can penetrate all of the farms.
Thank you. Would you like to invest in the company?
Sure. Why not?
The only reason it isn't everywhere is that it's early days. You know, starting a company and growing a company are difficult things to do. I'm glad that this product looks like a no-brainer to you, because if it weren't, there's enough resistance to anybody doing anything different than they've always done it. And with a new entrant into the market, if it weren't a no-brainer, we probably have no chance.
I run an energy assessment center, and we went to 2 cow farms in New York State to reduce their energy consumption. You know where the biggest energy consumption comes from? They have to refrigerate the milk.
That's right.
So they milk the cows at 4 a.m. in the morning. They refrigerate the milk. They have to send the milk for testing.
Yep.
Until it comes back negative. They have to hold it, which may be 2 days, because the test has to take place over a 2-day period, traditional testing. And because of that, they have to have multiple days of storage capacity, multiple vessels. So this milk is not instantaneously going into the market unless they can confirm all their cows to be disease-free.
Well, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you remember from this slide a long time ago, I said the cost of this single disease, according to Cornell, is $2 billion a year. And the size of this entire market is $50 billion. So what percent of 50 billion is 2 billion?
It's a, you know, if you just look at.
And by the way, that wasn't seriously the question. Yeah. So it is 4%. So now a large part of that $2 billion is having a sick cow, feeding the sick cow, treating the sick cow, managing the sick cow, and throwing away the milk because the cow's sick. You can't use that milk. That represents potentially a 4% opportunity for energy savings on that farm. So my question to you is, do you think that our ability to reduce the incidence of this disease is a relevant means of energy conservation? And is there a way that we can collaborate on bringing this potential 4% energy savings opportunity to those farms?
It is actually more than 4%. That's what I'm trying to say.
That's the answer I was looking for.
Yeah. More than 4%, because, as I said, the milk is stored under refrigerated conditions And these farms don't have a lot of energy. In fact, one of the farms installed a 600 kW solar panel just to make sure they will be able to run the lights, etc., because they were using so much of electricity.
Well, we definitely have a good reason to follow up. Now, last chance for questions before we have, thanks to Laurel, Kate. Yes.
Any intellectual property protection?
Yes, we have 5 patents and lots of trademarks and trade secrets. Of the 5 patents, 2 are specifically relevant to the market that we're in today. The 3 others cover markets we might enter in the future. And our patent strategy is we have 1 specific patent for dairy and then 1 general patent to cover our fieldable PCR. But within those patents, we also have key elements that we've kept out as trade secrets: the recipes, the proprietary reagents, the proprietary algorithm. So we believe we have an extremely strong picket fence strategy surrounding our ability to compete in this market. So what that means is when we are successful, someone will have to buy us. And that's sort of probably our end game as a company. We'll be acquired by a larger player 3 or 4 years from now, I hope. Yes.
Chuck, if this was a spin-off of SRC, was it discovered by accident or was it on some other work they were doing? And the second part of that would be, what are the other applications for the gene?
The question was this an accidental discovery? And the answer is no, it was quite deliberate. So Colonel Moser, who I mentioned earlier, was a chemical and biological weapons officer in the US Army for 21 years. He rose to the level of lieutenant colonel, and then he retired, at which time he went to work for MIT Lincoln Labs, where he spent 5 years trying to develop a fieldable system to do chemical and biological defense. In other words, if our troops in the field know what they're being hit with in terms of chemical and biological weapons, they would be better able to defend themselves against it. Then he moved to this area and worked for SRC for 8 years on that same problem. And the best I can say is they didn't win the big DoD contract. So SRC said, all right, we're going to shut down our ChemBio group, of which Tim was the founder. Tim grew up on a dairy farm that his grandparents owned and that they passed on to his aunt and uncle. So he had a lot of experience with dairy. He was aware that mastitis was a serious economic problem and that there wasn't a very good solution out there. So he asked SRC, when they decided to shut down ChemBio, would they fund him to build a company to create a solution for dairy? So it was very deliberate, and SRC put millions of dollars behind that and this system was developed by SRC. A year ago, SRC brought me in as a consultant to help take the company to the next level. And they decided that it would be better outside of SRC, particularly because they've had so much success lately with their radar procurements. They're growing very, very rapidly, and they don't want to be distracted by this market, nor do they want this company to be ignored. So they allowed us to acquire the business from them. So we're now a completely independent company. SRC is a note holder, so they're an investor, but they have no other, they don't have any stock ownership, for example. They're just holding a note. And we're very grateful to them. We wouldn't exist without the forward thinking of Colonel Moser and SRC. Okay, anybody want cake? And as Angie said, there's thank you. And thank you to those of you online. I think we're going to shut down the webinar. Sorry, you're not here for cake.